just go with your gut, you know. There's a reason why you think the way you do and want to do the things you do, and you just can't let anybody tell you don't do it. But especially you. Don't allow you to tell you not to do it. You know, the loudest voice that's a contrarian is usually me. And you know, all these little moments of confirmation that that voice should just shut up allows you to just do what you're supposed to do while you're here.
Failure is a part of the learning process, right? What's the risk of failure? What, you'll be embarrassed, or risk of failure? How do you distinguish failure from learning? In your whole life, you know, failure implies that it stopped, that the game stops, right? If it's part of you're failing and then you learn, then that learning is part of the moving forward, right? So that is what the process is like. Fail, learn, move forward, and constantly do that because you're cutting edge. You're going where people haven't been before in inventiveness.
The choice you have as an underdog is if you're going to choose to fight and choose to fight to win. There are a series of strategies available to you, but they are all more costly than the strategies available to the favorite. So I give the example of a chapter about a software mogul in Silicon Valley, an Indian guy who coaches his daughter's, 12-year-old daughter's basketball team. And they are without talent. They are. By his own admission, this was like, they barely knew how to play the game. He takes them all the way to the national championships. He does it he instructs them, they're going to play the full court press every minute of every game and defend every inch of the court, right? Now, that's actually a very effective strategy, particularly in age class basketball. If you're the underdog, it's usually your only chance of winning is to play a really, really aggressive defense. It requires, however, that everyone in your team expend maximum effort every minute of the game. You cannot loaf for an instant. You have to be in really good shape and you have to run yourself ragged and you cannot let up. Most people will not play that way because it's too difficult. If I said to you, we're not going to be doing elegantly designed plays and shooting gorgeous baskets and passing the ball, we're just going to be doing this for the entire game, and you're going to be exhausted at the end. Most kids would say, that's not why I signed up. So it's like, that's a kind of classic illustration of that effort is the route, one of the routes available to the underdog. I can outwork you, even if I may not be able to outspend you, but I can outwork you. Well, outworking is a tall order. It's not easy to do, you know. That's, as anyone who has worked in a startup knows, that's one of the stressful parts of it.
Ask yourself, what if no one ever bought any of my work? What if I'm never going to sell a book or publish a book or a short story? Are you going to continue to write? And if the answer is yes, because I have to, then yeah, then you are a writer. And whether you'll sell or not, I can't know. But if there are stories in you that have to get out, you want to put them down on paper, whether you ever get the affirmation of a contract or a book in your hand or being on the bestseller list, if you still have to tell your stories, then you're a writer. If you can give it up, then it probably would be an act of sanity to learn accounting or something like that.
Being on this planet, one of the first things people would say, if we were all dumped down here, let us say there were only 10 of us, right, and we were dropped into this planet already formed, one of the first things we would say after a moment or two would be, is everybody okay? Let's get something to eat. And that should be the first thing any society says. Is everybody okay? Let's get something to eat. And we don't, because we have this private property thing. Property rights over people's rights. And I just think that competition got the upper hand over cooperation. This species was successful.
Because as part of the American experience?
No, as part of the human species.
The human species.
The verge of failure that we're on is because two wonderful qualities that made us a successful species, cooperation and competition, are way out of balance now. Competition is everything. Cooperation happens after a flood. Happens for a few days. Everybody goes back to where they were before.
Florida did happen after hurricane.
Right. And we need to get that balance back. If we can get that balance back, there's hope.
You come to Hollywood and you're chasing this dream, you want to be an actor, you know? Like, there's not a ton of milestones that are crystal clear that you know what they look like. Because for the most part, the things that are going to help you get to your goal are movies that haven't been written yet, they're jobs that haven't existed yet. You're kind of giving yourself over to this thing saying like, please, I don't want to be a waiter anymore. I want to be an actor, you know?
Yeah.
And that's that. And so there's very few things that are crystal clear, like images of what you would want. But one of them is to work with an icon, to work with somebody like a Steven Spielberg. And so like so that to me was one of, you know, my goals. You wouldn't even want to say it out loud because it'd be so ridiculous to say,
yeah.
What do you want to do, kid? Well, I want to work with Steven Spielberg. And they'd be like, nah, I don't know, you know?
Your toughest work is defining what your work is. He put it in broad terms. This is very specifically what he's talking about. What is the work embedded in that, and getting very clear about that. And I guarantee you, if you sat down and take at least a few of the things off your list and make these decisions, what's the project? Write it down. What's the action step? Write it down. You will feel exponentially more appropriately engaged with your world. Never seen an exception to that.
Hey, work to your potential, not your quota. If you want to stay really motivated, if you want to answer the question to why people that have already made it keep pushing, it is because they don't operate on quotas, they operate off potential. They're driven to reach their potential. This is also tied to their ethical obligation. They know what they're capable of. Nobody can tell you what you're capable of. You're the only one that knows, okay? So work to your potential, not your quota. Quotas are numbers. Who made them up? Some guy says, okay, your quota is blah, blah, okay? Based on what? How did he come up with that quota? He only picked that quota, that number, because he thinks it's significant or compared to other people maybe in your industry. Look, don't operate on quotas. You want them, clearly you want them, but you want to be driven to reach your potential, not just some number, some mechanics. Hey, my potential, I know. Nobody else knows it. I know what it is. You know yours. Work to your potential, not just a quota, and I promise you, you will be on fire day and night.
I think people need to sit down and clarify what experiences are you really looking for in your life. And that doesn't necessarily mean, it can include lots of money, but it can also include what do you want to experience with that money? A sense of freedom, a sense of service, a sense of providing value to the world, a sense of self-confidence and self-efficacy. What is it that you're after? So there's, in my own, explorations in the whole personal growth and self-awareness, game for years, I've been involved in that pretty seriously. There's an exercise that say, well, what do you want? I want a red Porsche. Great. What experience do you think that's going to give you? Freedom and a sense of fun, whatever. And then the people get the red Porsche, and they're worried about somebody going to dent it, and they can't afford the payments on it. They didn't really get the experience they were looking for. What happened? They got the symbol, but they didn't get the inner experience. But if you want the experience of freedom and fun, you can have that this afternoon. Doesn't mean you shouldn't have the red Porsche, but it just means that if you start to focus on the inner experience, what would climbing the corporate ladder give you as an inner experience? Why do you want that? What's important to you about that? And it could be I want to provide, for my family, for after I'm gone. So there's a sense of building wealth or building net worth or building assets, for the people around you that matter to you. There's no right or wrong about any of your answers to this, but I think getting clear about whether you want to do that or whether you want to get there because you want to be able to impact a much larger segment of the world for doing good or taking it over, I don't know, for whatever you want. But I think that's the key, is being able to externalize and start to become objective about, well, what is it that you're after? And so just crafting your own ideal scene, not only of the things you want, which is fine, don't stop that. Matter of fact, don't feel embarrassed that you want a red Porsche. So there's nothing wrong with any of that material stuff that you might want, but it's also true that it's a real good idea to just say, let me just lay that all out. And then use that as a map just to then guide you in terms of your intuitive decision making. I don't think you have to work at it that hard, but I think you do need to be conscious about it and validate it in some part of yourself.
People have a hard time doing nothing. But we know now, in terms of brain science, that you need as much time to let your brain relax and be spontaneous and daydream in order to refresh its decision-making cognitive power. Because you only have a limit of that. And so if you're not napping, if you're not getting enough sleep, if you're not backing off and letting your mind just relax and wander, then you're sub-optimizing your cognitive abilities. So, yeah. Most people procrastinate, though, because they're afraid of stepping into something you don't feel like you can be successful at. So just the simple idea of deciding what's the very next action I need to take. Oftentimes, people's lists do not have next actions.
All life is magical. It is magic, you see, because we're the instruments, and all problems are technical. Once you can go through those problems without avoiding them or backing off from them, because it's like fear. You go through it. You go through the problem, confront it and go through it, then you have release. Stanislavski called it the plane of inspiration that takes off from the runway. And the runway is the technique, the runway is the getting on with it. And the plane will take off. If on Tuesday night, however, it doesn't quite take off, it doesn't matter, you can't stop the plane and say, well, I'll go back because I don't feel it tonight. You get on with it technically, and then on Wednesday night, probably it's going to take off again, as long as you're relaxed. But it really is, it's kind of being on automatic pilot. And I think it comes after experience. I think it comes, and I think I feel in the happy state of mind now that I have 15 years or 20 years of experience behind me. And I think it's used well, and there's a lot of positive out of all the anguish and the pain and discomfort. And there've been good times, there've been negative times. But Olivia said once, when he was directing Colin Blakely in June and the Peacock, and I was in June and the Peacock, and he said, you have to find the middle man. And Blakely said, what do you mean? He said, find the middle man, that ease of playing a character. And Blakely said, I only have until next week. And he said, you won't do it next week. It'll take you the rest of your life. And it's really relaxing and letting go. The booster that puts one into outer orbit, the aggression, the arrogance and the ambition and all that, that's all very necessary. But there's a time when one has to let go. And I guess I'm in orbit. And all I have to do is rest assured that it's going to be okay and do what is required of me, Keep in practice, keep working. I'm going back to the theatre. I want to go back to the theatre. And I'm being kind to myself. That's all I can say, really. Then the magic happens. Schofield is right. You get on with it. John Dexter told me in New York, he said, just get on with it. Don't analyze. Do it.
Don't take no for an answer. If it's not working well that night, it's not you, it's the audience. Blame it on the audience. Because if it worked on Friday night, it ought to work on Saturday, and if it doesn't, it's their fault. It's oversimple, but you know what? It works as a formula. Just go on and do the Sunday night show and forget Saturday night. Keep kicking them in the nuts.
There are situations where being bad is highly advantageous. And, if you read, I don't go into this in the book, but if you've read, Innovator's Dilemma, that's what Innovator's Dilemma is all about, right? The disruptive outsider is the one who is incapable of meeting the marketplace needs as the market is traditionally defined. They can't do it, right? So what do? They try a completely new half-assed approach, which in the beginning doesn't work, right? But by that very nature of trying something completely outside the mainstream, they end up upending the, were they any good, they would never be forced to do that. So it's the same kind of principle. When you put forth effort, you get reward. When you throw your heart and mind and soul into something, you get something back. Now, in my book, I call that notion, that belief that effort brings reward, meaningful work. And when you look at the lives of people who are really successful, what you see over and over again is this idea of meaningful work is embedded in their consciousness. I tell a story in the book of the Beatles. Everybody knows about the Beatles. They come here in 1964 and the British invasion. The most interesting thing about the Beatles is what happened to them before they came to America. In the 1960 and 1959, when they were just kids, they were invited to go to Hamburg in Germany to be the house band at a strip club. And they went there and they stayed there for months on end. And 7 days a week, they played 8-hour sets, night after night in this strip club, right? And over the course of that extraordinary crucible, that experience of playing, they taught themselves how to be a great band, right? In fact, we think now that by the time the Beatles came to America, they had played together as a live band 1,200 times. We could go to all of the clubs on Friday night in San Francisco where all the promising young bands are playing. I submit to you would not find a single band that has played together 1,200 times. Right? Just doesn't happen. So what made the Beatles special? What made them special is that they were willing to play together 1,200 times, willing to play 8-hour sets 7 nights a week, 4 months at a stretch. And why were they willing? Because they believed in the notion of meaningful work. They had an opportunity to throw their heart and mind into something and get something back. And that made all the difference in the world.
People talk about, oh, you need a vacation or something. A vacation from what? I love my life. I feel I'm healthy, thank God. And, I have these incredible directors that are interested in working with me, and I'm going to jump at that.
Actually, mess is cool. Actually, the most productive times I am is when I have the freedom to make a creative mess. You too. I need room to be crazy, to make some mistakes, to brainstorm, to be chaotic, go a little off the edge. That is going to be your most productive time, is when you have that kind of freedom to do that. However, folks, if you're already in a mess, you ain't got room to make one. If your kitchen's a mess, you don't have time or the energy to have a creative dinner for your friends. If your desk and your office are a mess, you don't have room and space to be, crazy about some new project and spread out and have brainstorm with ideas. If your email is backed up on you with 1,000 unprocessed emails and you got 3,000 other things going on in your head, you have no space to take advantage of discretionary time that may show up in terms of being creative, in terms of your energy. The results of that, if you're trying to use your psyche to manage that mess and you never get out of it, is you get the results of two things that are the critical elements of self and organizational productivity. You'll lose perspective. That is, you lose the ability to put your focus where you need it on exactly the thing you need it, at the horizon you need it. And or you may be experiencing the results of what happens when you lose control. That is, I now don't have stability and I don't have the freedom in my head to be able to put the appropriate attention and execute on it when I do. So those are the two key elements. Folks, you can't manage time. You don't mismanage 5 minutes and come up with 6. The only time that you think you need time management is when one or both of these two dynamics is suboptimal. Either things need to be more under control or more appropriately focused. If you map those two things together, what do you get? If you, on the bottom left here, where you got no control and no focus, ever been there? That's your basic victim experience. You know, driven by latest and loudest. For the most part, most of us are thrown there by our own overcommitments and creativity. We're just trying to come up for air. Now, if that part of you shows up that has high focus and perspective, but no control, now you're the mad scientist. Now you're the desperate artiste. Now you're the crazy maker with all kinds of crazy ideas and no constraints of what you're doing. You're nothing very well organized. Middle of the morning, you decide to go buy the new iPhone, but your IT department won't support it. On the other hand, you could get down in the weeds and say, oh, wait a minute, I need to get 10,000 things organized. I need to get all this cleaned up. And now you get into micromanagement. If you don't have appropriate focus, you can get down on those weeds and hung up in them like crazy. And you'll spend a lot of time, doing a lot of trying to get organized about things that may not be that important. Right? In the morning, your crazy maker said, get a new iPhone. In the afternoon, you spend 2 hours of what could be a strategic afternoon trying to set up the right ringtones. Here's what's true about all three of those, folks. You ain't ready for what's coming towards you. You will be suboptimal in terms of your ability to handle the surprises, and they're coming. Good, bad, or indifferent, they're coming, trust me. And you want to be optimally available for those things when they come to you.
That's what we all do. We get to a certain age, we all stay in our comfort zone with our recliners watching television day in and day out. And when you get to a certain age, I'm going to be 70 at the end of the year, but I sit around watching television for the rest of my life because I've done it all, sitting on my laurel wreath. It's not worth it. I mean, life's so short, and such glorious images in the world, and such horror as well, that I want to see it all. And so I've moved out of my comfort zone. It's essential for me. Otherwise, I may as well die. So I've done it, I've broken every rule in the book, and not out of malice or any telling anyone that I'll show you. I did it to show myself. I've shown myself. I looked in the mirror, I thought, I'll show you one day, and I've done something completely new. I wrote the music, and I feel limitless.
Hey, I want to talk to you today about success. Success, duty, obligation, responsibility. If you approach it any other way, which most people are, most people think, well, I'll be successful if the economy works. I'll be successful if something happens. I'll be successful if I win the lottery ticket. Look, you're not going to be successful if you don't demand it, if you literally don't stake a claim to it and say, this is mine, it's in part. You're not going to have it, I promise you. I know, I'm telling you from experience. I spent the first 25 years of my life like a spectator, watching other people get successful and then wondering why I wasn't. Success is your duty. It is your obligation and your responsibility. Negativity is just negative. And there's no money in it. There's no future in being negative. Where's the solution? I can't do that. We can't do that. That can't happen. This is wrong. That's wrong. Oh my gosh, taxes are too high. Taxes are too... Dude, it's negative. It is negative. It is negative. Look, there's so much abundance of negativity. That by itself tells you why there's no value in it.
Sometimes the high points come from the low points. They're simultaneously, meaning I learn the most when I am making mistakes. And so I know, like, if I'm making money in the market, it might seem like a high point because you figure, okay, you're making money, but you don't test yourself as much. When you're making a low point and you're in misery, you're saying, how am I doing this wrong? And you're learning a lot, or at least I'm learning a lot.
Look, if you knew it was going to bank you money today, would you make time for it? Yep. So they would make time for it because they make time for the things that make them money. If you have a customer, hopefully, if you have a customer and you're working a deal with that customer and you got a hamburger in front of you, hopefully you're going to push the hamburger aside and work that deal because the priority is to make money. In the same conversation, that sales manager does not believe that sales training converts to ROI or money, so he doesn't make the time for it. When you say you don't have time, the truth is you're saying, I'm not making it a priority because I don't think it makes me money.
I woke up every morning excited. I was completely jacked. I've never been more excited to go to work every day as I was on this project. At the end of the day, I'd never been more drained in my life. But somehow, some way, I found the energy every morning to get up and just go for it. And the further we got into it, the more Wayne was just like, okay, do what you want to do. Do what you want to do. And I never had that kind of freedom before.
One sentence that I try to describe Bridgewater by, and it's meaningful work and meaningful relationships. This is what I want. Meaningful work and meaningful relationships through radical truth and radical transparency. So meaningful work means like we're in a mission together, we're excited about what we do, we want to do it excellently, that's meaningful work. Meaningful relationships are these relationships in where there's, like the honesty helps you. You can argue things through, but you always know that there's honesty and that there's mutual caring for each other. Radical truth means that knowing what is true, to be able to deal with reality, whether you like the reality or not, but to know what reality is. Like, imagine if you had a disease, would you want to know that you had that disease, or would you not want to know? I'd want to know. And so to know, if you have a weakness, do you want to know you have the weakness, or do you not want to know? Radical truth and radical transparency means you get to see everything. That's very powerful.
I just want to get better. I want to get better, and I want to work with great people. It's really simple. I don't want to be pushed. I think I push myself. So I have a pretty strong engine of wanting to grow. So.
There were moments, when I was learning the script and I thought, well, this isn't going to work. I mean, how can I do it? But I used to write notes to myself, little letters to myself, and put them on the desk saying, you can do anything with faith. You can move mountains, and trust and let go and all that sort of thing. And I used to just throw myself into it. And then when the negatives came to my mind, I would put positive sounds in my head. I'd say I can do it, and I used to meditate and visualize myself doing it. And I used to visualize myself on like a kind of, try and visualize myself doing those sort of fanning cards and spinning them, and gradually, surprising the power of mind, what happens, your muscles begin to respond. It's like anything really, if you're playing the piano or driving a car, it comes through relaxation.
It's not enough to have a great idea and the focus and the conscientiousness to see it to fruition. You must have the strength and the resolve and the courage to pursue that idea even when the rest of the world thinks you're insane. Time and time again, if you look at the stories of extraordinarily important entrepreneurs, there is almost always a moment when they are the only ones who believe in the value of what they're doing. I tell in my book the story of my book, David and Goliath, the story of Ingvar Kamprad, the guy who founds IKEA. And the crucial moment in the story of IKEA is when he faces a boycott from the other furniture manufacturers in Sweden, and he's about to go out of business. And in desperation, he moves his operations across the Baltic Sea from Sweden to Poland and sets up shop in Poland. And that's what IKEA is. IKEA is essentially furniture shipped flat, made in Poland. That's the original elevator pitch for IKEA. What's interesting about that is he does it in 1961. At the height of the Cold War, at a time when East and West, communist world and free world are closer to outright war than at any other time in history, a guy living in the West, Sweden, crosses the pond to Poland, the Iron Curtain, and sets up shop. You cannot imagine what a controversial move that was. That would be like Walmart opening operations in North Korea. Literally, it's on that level of kind of eyebrow raising, you've got to be kidding me, who is this guy kind of thing. But he does it and he persists and he turns his back on all those critics. Why? Because he is a deeply disagreeable person. Didn't need people to agree with him, right? And that's how he's able to build IKEA into this extraordinary runaway success story. That's very hard to do. As human beings, we are hardwired to want the approval of our peers.
I don't take for granted that people just admire what we do, so whatever we do, they'll admire. No, I feel like, in fact, this is very true. Every audience, I feel like we have to earn them. That we have to earn their dedication and their expenditure of time and energy and money to be there every single time. Every show, and it's an old show business thing, but I really feel that you're only as good as your last show. And that's the one thing I do like about touring. If you have a bad one, you get another chance.
Look, you want to get your work ethic so high that people actually admire you. I'm going to ask you a question right now. Do people know you because of your unbelievable work ethic? If you can't answer yes to that, man, you're not going to get in that top 10%. You got to get at the top. People have to know you, not because, oh, he's a good salesman. Oh, he's a good this. Oh, he's an artist. Oh, he's a good pianist. Oh, he writes a great, story. No, dude, people need to know you for one major thing first. He works. He produces. The guy's there every day. The guy's pushing and shoving. Because the truth is, no matter how good your ideas are, how good your art is, or how good your skill set is, if you're not working, man, if you're not vibrating at a frequency that people say, my God, how does that guy do all that? If you're not vibrating at that rate, 10x levels, massive action, tremendous work ethic that's just a muscle now, and it's just a discipline in your life, and it's a normal way that other people think is abnormal. Ryan Seacrest, Tom Cruise, Oprah, Steven Spielberg, Donald Trump, still pumping and working as a billionaire. Look, if you're not working at that level, you're not going to make it. Get your work ethic in, man. It's the American way. Work ethic. Check it out.
when Dick Nisbet, he makes a turn in his career as a psychologist where he goes from, remember, he thinks the fundamental attribution error in the beginning is fundamental.
Yeah.
And then he realizes, actually, no, it's cultural. And he puts out, and it doesn't refute the fundamental attribution error. It deepens our understanding of it to say, oh, actually, it has roots in Western culture, but you see a very different, and actually, then he writes that book about East-West, which is incredibly fascinating. So he gets 2 great books out of going back and going over and correcting his earlier position. That, to me, is the model for how you ought to behave in the intellectual world, which is, I think, you should always double back and say, well, no, wait a minute, this is more complicated here. We can kind of, and contradiction is too strong a word. But you should be constantly revising your conclusions.
I believe that everything works like a machine. So when we talk about markets, when we talk about economics, you know how I think it's just a machine. Everything has cause-effect relationships, and you can program all of that. We're machines. The human brain's a machine, and we operate that way. And in today's age, we have data. We have a lot of data. And so to be able to look at what people are like is a powerful thing. When I hear the interview about General Motors, and you think about one company or another, you think of Tesla, by contrast. Okay, look, there are 2 things that make a difference. It's either people or culture, okay? And that's everything. And so everybody's talking about this was done or that was done. Step back. What were your people like? How are they different? What is your culture like, and how's that different? And that's all that matters. And so if you look at it that way and you compare what the future of General Motors is going to be and the future of Tesla is going to be, or any such things, that's what all that makes up the difference. And you can put data together that shows that, and you can operate in that way, and that's what makes you effective.
Hey, I have a target. I know that when we don't achieve targets here in my office, the first thing I ask, regardless, the internet department, if it's my accounting department on collections, or it's my sales department, I'm going to ask a question. What is the target? No target results in no sales. So if you're in parts, if you're in service, look, have a target. Measure that target hourly. If you really want to get results, measure your target every hour to see what did we get in the last 60 minutes. I promise you, do those 2 simple things. Don't even learn anything about how to sell anybody anything. Have a target, measure it every hour, and I guarantee your sales will come up.
It is when people disagree, and you can take thoughtful people disagree, you have then the potential of learning a lot. If people who are disagreeing can say, why do we disagree, and work through that conversation in an intelligent way to try to find out what's true, you can learn, you can make progress. It can be a fabulous thing.
I suppose we compensate for our lives, for our lacks, if we choose to. Because I felt so lacking as a child and in my adolescent years and early adult years. I, through anger, resentment, or drive, or ambition, or whatever, I found my way somehow. I don't actually believe I did it totally on my own. I believe in some power of life that is in us. I'm a fatalist. I believe in destiny. I believe that if we relax and let go enough, and actually do believe that our lives are none of our business, and open up, then extraordinary things begin to happen.
And I've realized over the years that I've gone through many changes in my life. many changes, because that's the nature of life. And if you don't go with it, you may as well die, really. You may as well be dead. I know people who live in the past, they just live there all the time, talking about something that happened to them 30 years ago. They're like zombies.
I suppose you're calling them to talk about spiritual surrender or something or so on. You know, when we try to, I mean, my agent many years ago, I had an agent once, a very nice chap, but he said, we've got to plan your career. I mean, that sent me running out the door. I mean, you can't plan your life.
No, I wouldn't care for that.
You know, you make certain choices and you go along, and you chart the rapids and the rocks and the shallows and the depths and so on and so forth. But you can't really control your destiny. You can't really control things. You just have to let go and follow it.
Do as much as I can without driving myself insane, because there's a negative side of perfectionism. In my nature anyway, I can only speak for myself. There's a negative flaw, and there's a very dangerous trap, and I think one of the biggest killers is ego. And when it's the negative side of perfectionism, when one starts playing God, you know, and I mean literally, there is a killer, there is a lethal part of one's own ego.
I don't know if I believe in anything. I mean, I'm a deity, but I believe whatever that thing is that we talk about for centuries, I think it's just within us. I mean, things have remarkable things have happened in my life by just wishing or asking for something, for a bit of help here. So and I don't believe, I'm an agnostic, I guess. Is there any way you can help me or whatever? And there's something inside us that will respond, I believe. I really believe that. We have to make our lives, because life is tough. We have to believe in the power of life.